Hello everybody, my name is Delzar Slit, and today we're doing a reaction video to the desire not to exist. Or the desire to not exist. Now, do I know what the hell we're looking at? No. Am I even slightly aware of what I'm actually looking towards? No. But, as far as I'm concerned, let's figure it out right here, right now. Also, Afro, I agree with you. It is a very relatable title. Sadly, it is. I wish it was not.
One point or another felt the desire to not exist.
Hmm.
Now, when I say not
By the way, I've never watched anything by this person.
exist, I'm not talking about the way some people wish they had never been born, or
Hmm.
even somebody's self-destructive fantasies.
Yeah.
No, the desire to not exist is a yearning to magically disappear, preferably in a way that doesn't require any sadness, violence, or death. You may know it
Okay,
as the
now I
wish to
know
fall
this
asleep
one.
and never wake up again. As often as this desire is felt, it's mysteriously rarely discussed. What I found surrounding why we sometimes feel this way says a lot about the nature of our existence, desires, and how we interpret the existence of others. In one of the most memorable scenes from Dostoevsky's novel, The Brothers Karamazov, a monk and an atheist walk into a bar.
Mm-hmm.
They're brothers.
Bro, what? Fair enough. The story literally just said the brothers something something. I can't say that word. Masakazdov, whatever the fuck. Shit, now it's even more relatable. Yep.
Karamazov, to be exact. What ensues is a debate about the existence of God, albeit an
Doesn't matter if he's
unconventional
real.
one. In our world, nobody escapes the torture of daily pains and disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Even children suffer in horrific extremes. Thus, God, the elder of the two brothers maintains, must be evil to have introduced us to such a world. Any promises of paradise after this life are just taunts. Life is but a cruel angel's
Ooh.
thesis. It's not that I don't accept God, I just most respectfully return him the ticket,
I
he
agree with this
says.
thought process.
Ivan Karamazov rejects all notions of God's goodness. But even further than that, we can interpret that for Ivan, it is not so important to contemplate whether or not God exists. The question that must be asked is whether or not we want to exist in a world like this one. This idea would be repeated by Albert Camus.
I actually very much agree with this because that's one of my many reasons for not liking Christianity's thought process and going, if this is what the fuck we were given, why? I'm sorry, you say that, oh, it is to test your character and to do all this, and I go, but why? You have brought upon misery and suffering, famine and horror and plagues and everything else in this world. Yet you try to call that we are good. Lovely.
Who famously made the remark that in deciding whether or not one should kill oneself, one answers the fundamental question of philosophy. When we think of the desire to not exist, we usually imagine something akin to this kind of thinking. The idea that life is meaningless and insufferable is a popular one.
It's
However,
not.
when
It has
compared to
many
these
meanings.
outlooks, the
It's
desire to
just
not
belief.
exist is unique. What these individuals desire is not death, but to experience non experience. The desire is not a logical set of beliefs about the characteristics of life, but a complex psychological wish. Furthermore, not everyone who longs for nothingness thinks existence is entirely unbearable. To
Fair,
not
yeah.
want to die, but also wanting to simply not exist, implies a contradictory hope that one might continue to go on living. I think the most tempting way to explain this is to bring up what's
Mm-hmm.
called cognitive dissonance. When a person has two contradictory beliefs, but can only embody one of them, they will pick the one that is easier to exhibit.
God damn you. Fuck your truck. That truck propels the notion of ever. Fuck the
To
truck.
suggest that the people who would like to not exist continue to live their lives because death is much too messy and final. It takes a certain dedication to accept death. Of course,
I disagree. Actually, wait. He's not talking about killing yourself. He's talking about accepting death. Okay, never mind. Yes, dedication is needed to accept it. To just take your own life. No. You can do that out of fear and emotions running high and all that other shit.
there is something to be said for this idea. After all, most people would hesitate to see death as a solution to their problems, but this outlook of cognitive dissonance ignores the intense feeling these individuals still experience. not to mention the ways they'll still attempt to replicate nothingness in their own lives. One way of reading this
Mm-hmm.
contradiction is that it is prohibition that leads to fantasy. We desire that which we cannot have. Not only is nothingness impossible, we're told that we must not achieve it. We might therefore desire nothingness simply as a way to exert our freedom. The impossible is desired all the more for its impossibility.
Where comes the part where the Shadow the Hedgehog is actually Jesus? Local, this is not that video. This is from a completely different channel. So, I don't think I don't think the Shadow the Hedgehog is Jesus is coming back up here. Oh yeah, by the way, if you're wondering what the hell I'm talking about, watch the Shadow the Hedgehog video. Where we talk about him being Jesus.
One of the best references to the desire to not exist can be found in the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard's book, The Sickness Unto Death. Kierkegaard's argument is that the torment of the desire to not exist is the hopelessness of not even
I know it was a joke, local, but I'm using it as a proper time to plug myself.
being able to die. Death means an end to life, a perceived nothingness. Though not a sickness that will literally end in death, once a more horrifying reality
Mm-hmm.
than death is encountered, one will wish they could die. When even this last respite is taken from them, the desire to disappear will consume them in an act that Kierkegaard calls despair. But as we've
Aww.
already discussed, those that suffer from the desire to not exist don't exactly want to die. Kierkegaard, a deeply religious thinker, thought of despair as a response to the eternity that lies after death. By replacing his mentions of death with the idea of nothingness, we lose something from his writings. But even if we disassemble this part of his argument, the most fascinating portion still remains.
Mm-hmm.
There exist, even in life, simulated perceptions of eternity. When time is slowed to a crawl and every monotonous day bleeds out in unity, we are held a hostage of eternity. Boredom, depression, and nostalgia all linger here. But some of the less familiar resonants of non time also deserve a mention. The delirious ache of desire is felt here, and it is also in the silence of eternity that we catch our glimpse of nothingness. Eternity is important to Kierkegaard's argument because it
Yeah.
preserves everything he says a despairing person wishes they could be freed from. It's in eternity that the self remains immutable, and that's exactly what can be so dreadful about it.
I'm not saying anything right now because I'm trying to let him build to his point because it seems like he's building to something.
A self is a heavy burden. During the total ceasefire of time, the inability to escape from ourselves grows ever more prominent. Under the right conditions, that can be its own form of suffering. At a first glance, the anime Neon Genesis Evangelion appears to be about angsty.
I've never seen this. Wait, hold up. Let me check something real quick.
At a first
Nope, I do recognize this one. That red suit. Yep, I definitely know who this is.
glance, the anime Neon Genesis
Never watched
Evangelion
it, but I do
appears to
know
be
it with a
about
suit.
angsty teens piloting giant robots as they fight otherworldly entities referred to as angels. But in reality, the show is about one 14-year-old boy's fight with his desire to not exist. Of course, spoilers ahead. Each of the main characters suffers from an intense existential loneliness. However,
Hmm.
it's in Shinji, a character modeled after the anime's creator, that we find the show's depiction of this desire. Episode 16 is even titled The Sickness Unto Death, in reference to Kierkegaard. Ava isn't
Ooh.
shy about naming its philosophical influences. By explicitly using philosophy, Neon Genesis Evangelion presents us with an interesting existential argument. In order to understand that argument, we need to take a look at the ideas of the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, another one of the anime's major influences. In his book, The World as Will and Representation, Schopenhauer describes the way individuality can cause suffering. He argues that the world is made up of will and representation.
Okay, let's build. Let's see what the fuck he means by that.
While the total universe is in fact one thing, operating in unity, human beings each have their own will, distinct from that of
True.
the universe and each other. Furthermore, each person only experiences a limited sample of the total universe, causing them to have their own unique perspectives, longings, and pains. To Schopenhauer, as long as human beings exist separately from one another, there will be suffering. This dilemma is portrayed countless times in
Fair.
Evangelion, as the main cast of characters repeatedly struggle to deal with the pain inherent to the process of becoming close to another person. Ava doesn't just stop here, though. The shadowy organization Zila, German
Mm-hmm.
for soul, seeks the literal unification of all human life through what is called the Human Instrumentality Project.
What the
The
hell?
project is intended to destroy the boundaries of our egos and allow for total harmony as each person's consciousness is merged into one total unit.
That reminds me of another thing that's a lot more fucked, but reminds me of some fucking half crescent smile looking motherfuckers from a certain webcomic. If you know, you know. But mm, okay, so I was gonna say that that sounds like an awful idea if you decide to have all of human, well, consciousness, identity, and everything else meld together in a fucking melting pot. That'd be horror. That'd be horrific. But then I remembered the amount of, I don't know, compassion. No, it depends on whether or not you say that there is more negative in the greater scope of the world than there is positive. If you believe there's more negative all around, you would just say that that is awful because it would be basically a melting pot that would fester with the negativity of all these people. If you believe there's more positive, you believe that maybe it can kind of cure them and push them out. Or, in my own belief, I would say all of these people would basically simultaneously meld together until they reach a true natural melting pot of neutrality. In which, at that point, I say that if the entire global consciousness has any semblance of sanity left after basically fucking up a bunch of people's minds, meaning that you're also adding in all mental illnesses, desires, depression, and everything else from every other person, which could also then tank their mental health too, which would slowly destroy everyone. But outside of that, and say that they all did somehow just like magically meld together and it all went perfectly normal into neutrality, what is the point of living? But then what is the point of dying? Because if everyone has become part of everything, individ- individuality is what's needed to be considered a person. If you become one with everything and everyone, what is the goddamn point? What is the point of life if you can't tell yourself apart from the rest of the people?
Don't leave me. Don't ignore me. Don't kill me!
What the hell is this?
This apocalyptic event will unite all minds, hearts, and bodies as one. In the movie End of Evangelion, after the Human Instrumentality Project is unwittingly put into motion by Shinji, we're presented with a surreal commentary on the psychology of those who desire nothingness.
Asuka, help me! Please! Asuka, you're the only one for me!
You're lying.
Hmm.
You know you are. You'd run up to anyone. You're afraid of Misato and Rei. You're afraid of your father and your mother. It's just that now you're only running to me. It's the easiest and least painful thing to do.
Come on, Asuka, help me!
The truth is, you've never really loved anybody.
The psychoanalyst and
What?
philosopher Jacques Lacan suggested that our desires form in response to
Huh.
our separation from one another. Lacan often discussed the existence of something called the other. We can understand his mentions of the other in two ways. First, as someone who is not you. Second, as the big other, a more
What?
enigmatic character. The big other's essential feature is that we struggle to know what it desires despite our persistent efforts to find out. The big other is not a person, per se. It is a symbol, a category. All desire forms in response to some lack in our lives. All desire fundamentally presupposes other desires, and all desire craves recognition.
Hmm.
Lacan's argument is that your desire comes from your best guess as to what the big other lacks or desires. The big other is always present in the mind. Its imagined presence leading you to wonder if your desire is acceptable, and more importantly, if you, as you define yourself, are a desirable person. Schopenhauer saw the individual will of the self as a pointless striving with no end. To him, only suffering arises from our wants, because
Okay.
our wants can only stem from an initial dissatisfaction. This also applies to what Lacan is saying here about desire. There are many ways one's desire might repel others, and it is always a fact that we never truly comprehend what the other desires from us. The burden of desire easily finds itself implicated alongside pain. Evangelion makes a very important point that obsessing over the desire of the other can introduce feelings of shame, ending in the desire to not exist. Shame is a deep disappointment with oneself for not being desired, a feeling that the whole self is invalid. Yet it can only be felt before something of an audience, even if it's an imagined one. In shame, we view ourselves from an exterior perspective, that of the big other. The desire of the big other isn't as simple a matter as merely doing what other people want from us, it's about wanting the thing other people want.
Okay. Too many uses of the word other, my brain's melting. I was trying to keep up. I understand, but I don't. I'm lost, but I'm caught up. I've been abandoned, but also cared for? What the fuck am I listening to? Big other, no other, little other? Huh? So other is your internal mental state, and then big other is. You know what? Maybe it'll grow on me if I watch the video more. I'm lost trying to keep up with that one.
Shinji is afraid that he has no desirable qualities other than being the pilot of his Eva, and to be fair, he's not so far off. He's let the demands of other people dominate him, demands that stem from their own unresolved issues. Misato wants Shinji to be what she could never be. Asuka wants him to be less apologetic in pursuing her, and by the end of it all, it's still not really clear what his father desires of him. Notorious is the dynamic that plays out as a result. Shinji thrashes about in indecision, hesitant to pilot his Eva knowing the pain it will cause him, but nonetheless wanting to please others.
What?
He's told to only do it if he wants to, which is really just a more severe way of being told to do it and enjoy it. The presentation of a choice here is really an illusion.
I wouldn't let me scroll down. I swear this one's different.
Yuri?
It just annoys the shit out of me. It's like, no, I'm not gonna let you scroll. I'm not gonna let you shut the fuck. Come on, bitch. I need to get through.
All this culminates into the conflict of Shinji's own desires as they bite and cower at the desire of the big other. In certain scenes and through certain responses, we see that Shinji is ashamed that his desires are not those of the others. One can think life is full of good and still not want to fully take part in it. Rebelling against all existence, he thinks he has acquired evidence against existence, against its goodness. The despairer thinks that he himself is this evidence.
I loved this philosophy. And up until this other shit, I got all of it. I'm now lost. Please move on to another analogy so I can try to keep up again.
Acting against what we desire or feeling disgust at what we desire both lead to shame. Both involve a sensitivity to the big other. Desire always plays some sort of a role in shame because the true nature of our wants constitutes a fundamental part of the self. Despair over something, such as rejection, really is despair over having a self, writes Kierkegaard. I believe the desire to not exist can be understood as an expression of frustration at one's individual existence. Despair rages in each of us as we acknowledge the truth that we are not one, but rejection especially bruises those who desperately want to be desired. These
Hmm.
persons who suffer from the desire to not exist really want to have no desires, to experience the freedom and peace of a complete dissolution of the self as it is known. We will never be one, but after I cease all striving forward, perhaps I can numb the pain inflicted on me by my neglected desires. Everything that matters to me matters in this world, and that's the precise reason I find it all so tiring. The cold anesthesia of nothingness is the nuclear option for desire. This attitude of distance is fully displayed in the behaviors tied to the desire to not exist. There's just one more thing I wanted to understand. What's the solution? In order to figure that out, I first thought it necessary to get as close as possible to actually
Huh.
experiencing nothingness myself.
Did he go to a light
Sensory
room?
deprivation
Ah,
tanks are pods of salt water that work to eliminate each of the five senses. In
disassociation
them,
is
there's
fun.
no light, sound, or gravity. In order to experience what nothingness is like, I decided to jump into one of these things. After setting up an appointment at a place that offered these, I step in and begin to float. The lights turn off, and slowly my world is ending. Finally, only I remain.
There is nothing. Only warm primordial blackness.
Yep.
My body is sleek from the salt. The water feels as if it expands out infinitely. My limbs grow heavy. In the darkness, my eyes project forth the afterimages of meaningless shapes and colors that I spend some time assembling into coherent objects. My time in that pod felt both instantaneous and infinite, almost like a dream. When it did end, stepping out of the darkness, I felt as if I was emerging from an imaginary space deep within myself. And yet, I found that the peace I experienced there did not make me hate existence. I rather felt content with it. In episode 20 of
Lovely.
Evangelion, Shinji is dissolved into a primordial soup inside of his mecha with only his consciousness remaining. Kinda like me here. Kinda.
I was
With
gonna
the
say, you don't
choice
got
to
a mech
remain in
suit,
the state
man.
of nothingness or to return to the physical world, he contemplates his self-worth. We're again introduced here to the fact that Shinji determines the value of his existence through how desirable he is to others. We are to understand, however, the solution that is proposed here, as it is this that ultimately influences Shinji's desire to return to the real world.
It's your future. Only you can decide, Shinji. You must make a choice.
All philosophy is in some way an interpretation of the philosopher's own experiences. Sensory deprivation, although not as surreal an experience as to what Shinji goes through here, helped me to understand that there is yet another way to imagine ourselves returning life the ticket. We do not need to allow the immediacy of our existence to define us. We can learn to create out of the void that we yearn to return to. We all have the ability to go
I
from
like this
feeling a
person's
mixture
wrap
of
up.
pleasure and guilt in our desire to feeling secure in the thing that propels our desire. I believe that part of this process is learning to decide for ourselves how we feel about our desires and what causes them, instead of presenting ourselves to be judged by a jury of our own conjuring. We must
I wish I
understand
was
that
able to
everything in this
understand
life
and
is in a
contemplate the
constant
last
state of
one,
becoming.
well, the last
All
metaphor,
people
but
will
I was
continue to
very
grow
lost.
closer and farther from each other in an endless variety of ways. In our simulated eternities, we fear that we will always be prone to repeat the same mistakes, to desire the same things, and to always be the disgusting person we are now. If we trust in the idea that even the absurd is possible, we can instead push forward to carve out opportunities for our acceptance. Shame
Yes.
arises when we trust in the big other to decide what is acceptable for us. But the actual people in our lives, while they might not always agree with what we desire, still
Mm-hmm.
have the chance to accept us if we trust them.
Hold up, I think I just got it. So the big other isn't what other people think, but it's what you believe other people think. So it's your interpretation of what everyone else's understanding of reality is. If I understood that, hooray! Luckily, I got it by the end of the video. Sadly, I only got it by the end of the video, which now it's starting to make everything make sense. Okay, so yeah, fuck it.
Friction will always exist between what they want and what we want. Accept that, and you can take the risk to be accepted yourself. In taking that risk, and accepting the potential pains of desire, you'll already have made steps towards accepting yourself, and moved beyond the desire to not exist.
Anyways, my name's Mendelzar Slit, and I would like everyone here to go out and watch this original
If you
video.
enjoyed this video,
It's
you'll
gonna be in the
absolutely
description
love my
below,
video
so
on the
please
game with
just
a
do that.
perfect portrayal of trauma.
If you do that for me, I will actually enjoy you as a person. Okay, like I'll really like you. If you like go in the description and watch this original video and go all the way through and just like enjoy this channel, subscribe to them, like them, find them. Thank you. Okay, here comes the part where I plug myself. So, I need you to do a couple things for me. Number one, just comment on whether or not I did something right, wrong, what I should improve on, what I should stop doing. Um, and the like and dislike shit, I don't really care. If you decide to do it. As for my own thing, where I say like subscribe to me or not, you know the two criteria. Number one, you want to just be around and like support, and number two, the most important one, you subscribe because well you think I'm worthy of your subscription. Don't subscribe out of pity. It just doesn't work. Okay. I would like people to have me on your For You page and you actually want to come around and like just chill. Or come to the streams even. If you ever have the time. Trust me, I'm always streaming for the most part. Yeah, Afro's literally said it there, hit the bell for Dell, but only if you mean me well. Yeah. Anyways, my name's Mendoza Slit, so please have a lovely, significant, magnificent, omnipresent, omnipotent, and most importantly, deplorable day.